Good morning, everybody, and welcome back to the Harder Not Smarter podcast. Our guest today is an expert in the psychedelic assisted therapy space, often referred to as PAT. She's the founder and CEO of Flow Integrative, a clinic providing ketamine assisted therapy for issues ranging from PTSD, anxiety, depression, TBIs, and so many more. Their mission is to help the help, meaning they're looking to support the mental health issues of veterans and first responders from the traumatic services they often had to provide. As a 29-year veteran of the firefighter and EMS world, as well as being a tenured professor, she is intimately familiar with the trauma medical personnel are exposed to on a daily basis. When she discovered ketamine as a treatment option herself, she knew she needed to bring this option and others like it to a much broader audience. Please, everyone, welcome Christi Myers to the Harder Not Smarter podcast.
Thank you, Kevin. Nice to meet you, Greg.
It's always a pleasure speaking with Kristy.
Thank you.
So to jump into it, the elephant in the room, ketamine and other psychedelics are getting a lot of attention in the media these days. The VA is running clinical trials on veterans with PTSD. You're hearing about ayahuasca and other plant-based medicine retreats that are all the rage, whether they're being done in the U.S., kind of hush-hush, or people are going down to Peru or other countries to get them done. What can you tell us about ketamine and other psychedelics for the mental health treatment?
Yeah, well, the word psychedelic means to make manifest. We are all the creators of our reality. And so what this medicine allows for is a perspective. And ketamine is very short acting. And it can be taken. And what I mean by short acting is its half-life, right? How long does it stay in the body? And how long are you sitting with the medicine? And so we've built out a protocol where you sit for about an hour, 50 minutes plus minus, with the medicine itself, allowing you to become the observer. And we have 70,000 thoughts a day, and we can show that 60,000 of those are from the day before. So what does that mean? It means we're continuously pulling the past into our current reality. And when you're able to then become the observer of those thoughts, and if there is trauma that lives within those thoughts, which if we made it out of childhood, most of us have PTSD, if not all of us, right? No one comes out unscathed. And there's some magnitudes that impact more in the sense of professional side of trauma, right? And not to deduce the moral injury or the things that are happening in home, but once you can become the observer and witness the trauma from a different perspective, rather than still through the lens of the victimization, it deduces suffering. And that's the mission.
Yeah, Greg, didn't you just post about?
I literally just posted about that today, about how 90% of thoughts are repetitive on LinkedIn, and then 80% of those are negative. So being able to intervene with that, it's because it really is, at the end of the day, it's just a snowball effect, right? It just gets worse and worse over time as long as you're not being intentional about addressing it.
Right. And then we can also show that 50% of that's embellished. And so what I mean is, if you have a victimization story or a trauma story and you're continuously telling it, you're adding to it. And so now we're making it deeper to that connection of our own expression, right? And so we tell the story over and over again. It trains that network deeper and deeper and deeper. And if we were to take a step back and just listen to ourselves speak, we would see that we're still telling stories of things that have happened for some 3 decades ago. And so that's the magnitude or the depth of the relationship to the trauma, which then becomes a memorized state. And in that memorization, you now have an identity wrapped around it. And that's what we're working to dissolve, right? Ketamine's a catalyst. They all are catalysts, right? And it allows for observation of yourself from a higher perspective. And in that, it then deduces our relationship to it because we're no longer viewing it from the lens that created it.
Absolutely. Yeah, I just made the comment on it that, positive self-talk, words of affirmation, gratitude, expressing gratitude. These are all things that are very easy to do to rebuild that mental perspective, but because so many people have that negative self-taught already built in, it's very difficult for people to break. And I'm going to steal my friend's term. He's a FBI agent. He always deals with stupidity, so he calls it the stupid loop of what's going on in your mind. You keep telling yourself these negative things over and over and over again. It becomes very difficult to even do something as simple as say, I'm happy because this. I'm grateful because I have this. I am capable because I can do this. And so having something like ketamine to break that stupid loop, to give you a different perspective of what you're capable of, what you already have, what you're potentially could be, is a huge step in the right direction.
Yeah, it's a mirror molecule. And so now it allows for collapsing of timelines, meaning if we can now witness the trauma, it basically cancel clears, right? And so now we no longer are continuously running that loop. And we can refer to it as the default mode network. We can refer to it as a searing event, right? And that's where, depending on the circumstantials, trauma will get stamped or seared in. And what we're also, I guess what I'm making mention of as well too, is how early it starts. For example, if you have children and the first time they encounter a spider, right, or a snake or something that has fear around it or the potential of fear, it's in the reaction of us as parents that then sears a memory for them as their first imprint of encounter. And so we can start stamping trauma into ourselves and our children at such early ages, and not forgetting that we were once children, right? I mean, what were your parents scared of? How did that directly impact you? And then how did that translate into your now?
Yeah, that's a great point. I think of like my mom is an anxious lady, and that is like 100% like manifested in me as an adult. Anxiety is something that I definitely deal with to this day. So I can totally see that, and I try to think back to like, and obviously it's my mom is just an absolute sweetheart, so it's no fault of hers.
Right.
We all have our faults, but yeah, I try to think back like, what were those moments that I'm now taking on as a parent, and how is that showing up for my kids? So, and you see all the time on like Instagram and like breaking generational curses and stuff like that. Not that it's a curse. I think that anxiety can be good in some aspects. But yeah, I think it's super important that people start addressing these things now, as parents, before they pass it on to their kids. It's such a great point.
Thank you. One of the philosophies in my home is this my trauma or is this my truth? Meaning, am I now conjuring a false belief system based off of an imprint that occurred to me however many years ago? Just recently, I asked my son if he wanted to go to a lacrosse game with me. And he's like, the last time I was at a lacrosse game, it was at a high school and someone tried to steal my phone. So no. And I was like, so that incident is now going to taint the rest of your experiences. And he's like, yeah. Like, is that your trauma or is that your truth? And so then the trauma directly impacts the way that we're going to continuously engage, right? But in his 13-year-old mind, that's what's occurring, right? And so then it allows for at least discernment before these kids can have the opportunity to sit in an altered state of consciousness and expand their awareness, right? We only use 5% of our brain. Like, my main question is, why wouldn't you want to become psychedelic? We're expanding consciousness. Otherwise, we can convince ourselves that we're perfect. Well, and to be clear, we are perfect as we are, right? But we're evolving. And in that evolution comes the consciousness that goes along with it. A lot of times we attribute growth to age, right? I mean, we hit these milestones, especially with kids. Like, 1 is because the parents survived that first year, right? We celebrate the hell out of 1 years old. And then 5 comes kindergarten. And then again, it's not even until we're in the preteens. And then it's, 13. Here comes 16, 18. Then there's a gap till we turn 21. And the next thing you know, it's dirty 30. And then you're over the hill. So we equate growth to age rather than the evolution of our consciousness and the way that we're able to hold our own space.
Mm-hmm. And so with that, how did you discover ketamine as something that would help you get through the trauma you experienced? I know
Yeah.
you were a firefighter, you were EMS, you were paramedic and flight paramedic. You
Yeah.
teach EMS at the university, and you've just been so involved in the medical space. I'm sure that you guys see a huge amount of trauma, probably arguably more than a lot of military veterans, because it's day in, day out for you. You leave your house, you go to work, you see this trauma, and you go back home every single day. Where in the military, you leave, you go to a completely foreign place, do bad things over there, and then come back, and you can have that separation where I don't think the first responder world gets that buffer.
Yeah, it's definitely an interesting area right now for all of us, because the other thing that's really becoming prevalent too is adrenal fatigue. But ketamine found me. So in all of those different iterations, I've used ketamine in different facets, right? One is conscious sedation. And that was something we used in the emergency room, most specifically for pediatrics. Kids do amazing with ketamine, but it's all in the delivery system, right? Each doctor is practicing. They have standardized procedures, but they can even go rogue from there and have their own intelligence that comes in, right? There is an SOP, but it's up to interpretation and has variability. And so you'll see different doctors work with the medicine in different deliveries. So conscious sedation is one thing. It just reduces you having to go to an operating room to reset a bone or a dislocation. It makes it really quick at bedside because ketamine is so versatile and safe. Then the other side, as a ground medic, I witnessed the aftermath of people using it recreationally. And most of that was poly drug use, meaning it's not until you get inebriated that you feel confident enough to try something new. And by that time, you've obtunded yourself or put yourself into a situation where it's not in the best or highest good. And then there's a repercussion, right?
Mm-hmm.
And so in ketamine, it made its way into our drug box. We as providers, when I started, we had morphine in the field, Versed, and then morphine soon transitioned into fentanyl. And after fentanyl was on board for several years, they introduced ketamine. And we can use it for multifacets, right? From anywhere from sickle cell and cancer to acute trauma. Because of the opioid crisis, we were given another tool for pain management for those who would say no to opioids. And rightfully so, right? And so at the time that ketamine entered our drug box, was the same time that I was really stepping into, is this my trauma or is this my truth? I've been practicing that now for several years, if not close to a decade. And I had ignorance. I was like, what? I was like, we have ketamine? I was like, I don't know. It's like a good idea, guys. Uh, and I had to I was fortunate to lecture on it because it changed the course of my life, right? And the more I studied it, because you can't wing this information, right? You can in some classrooms, but you're not going into classrooms of men of caliber and women and winging it, right? So for me to understand the information, I just dove into ketamine so that I could incorporate it into the theoretical side of medicine. I taught anatomy and physiology, pharmacology, and then theory. And so the more I lectured on it and incorporated it into the anatomy and physiology and really sat with what is it doing with the limbic system. And at the same time, I was witnessing the mental health crisis, not only in my classroom, but in the field. We were running suicides more frequently. We were having near suicide attempts in the classroom, even. I had a student try to take their life on finals. Or guys would come in and they would, it's courage, right? I mean, once you demonstrate that you're a safe space, there's a lot that we're dealing with as providers. And these people that are going to school, or my students at the time, they were trying to juggle everything, right? They're going to work full time. They have a wife and kids. They can't come up for air. So they're treading water. And then you're being met with this trauma in the field that just starts compounding and cascading. How long can you endure that? And for a majority, they can't, especially if they came into this profession really green, right?
Mm-hmm.
Uh, if you didn't, and trauma ages you, right? I mean, if you never experienced trauma when you were a kid and you walk in at 18 years old and you witness for your first time uh, a baby dying or whatever that may be, that impacts you. That's the searing events, right? And so now you can't unsee it. And as you can't unsee it, now you're reliving it because now you have fear that each one of those calls that's coming is going to be another one of those.
Right.
So as I lectured on it, it became clearer and clearer. But it was about almost 4 years of lecturing on it before the intelligence of flow came to me. And that was during COVID.
Can you walk us through your first experience?
Yeah. For sure. I was running variables. So I was delivering the medicine in the field. I was helping the guys do it's volume over time, right? Like our dosing in the field was much different than the dosing we use now. And the first time I sat with the medicine, we were getting ready to launch. I had everything ready to go. And I came up with my first dosing. I had a therapist that was with me at the time that I was initially building with. And I ran variables. I was doing drug math. I was like, I was still, my thinking brain was not quieted, right? The dose was low because I had put in all of these parameters while we were still really looking how to build the protocol and what the dosing needs to look like for a sustained period of time to be able to disassociate, but not completely obtund.
Are you guys using Versed with ketamine? No, just ketamine?
Yeah. Yeah. And there are some providers that are doing that, which benzos and ketamine are not complementary of each other. And so therefore the dosing for ketamine has to be so much higher when you're stacking benzo up front.
Yeah, that's what we would use in the military depending on the casualty, but it would be ketamine plus Versed, and that was built in for emergent reactions, which is basically someone that's coming out of a K-hole and being really pissed off, because you can come out with like high levels of anxiety, potentially, especially in a traumatic situation.
Oh, for sure. Especially, and for K-hole, right? K-hole also gets called...
Can you walk us through real quick what a K-hole is for people that don't know?
Emergence phenomenon. And so what that means is the delivery of ketamine was so rapid that it rips the seat out from underneath of you and you fall through all of the trauma that's been stored inside of you.
Yep.
That's heavy, right? And for some, like military-wise, ketamine's used all the time. But you guys are delivering a large amount very quickly, and that's usually intramuscularly. And so biotransformation comes in, right? We're using the medicine IV. And what that means is it's straight into the bloodstream. It's 100%. It's to source. And you could K-hole people with that. You could just open it wide open. And that's how they do it in the OR. And some of that trauma is spilling over to these practices because that's muscle memory. And then you have intramuscular because ketamine works with the water and the fat in the body, meaning it has solubility. And so depending on your hydration and depending on your adipose is how quickly it's going to make its way to the bloodstream or how slow it will make its way to the bloodstream. So if you have a large dose into a large muscle, now you can't shut it off, right? And so now it's just hitting you, which then is ripping the seed out of you. And that limbic system or the reptilian brain separates so quickly that that's where you plummet into the depths of your intelligence, right? Or your memories, your acquisition center of everything that you've ever witnessed. And that can even go back cellularly, right? I mean, something to contemplate is we spend a total of 5 months inside of our grandmas. Cellularly, women are born with all of their eggs, well, at least 2 million of them that we can count, right? And so what does that mean? It means that my daughter was inside of me when I was inside of my mom.
Yeah, do the math on that.
Right. So some of the trauma that's coming up right now is not necessarily ours. It's ours to clear, but it was imprinted very early. And so if you come from a lot of anxiety or I mean, shit, my grandma went through the Great Depression, my great grandma, right? And my grandma, she was born in 1935. So what does that mean for me cellularly, for my mom cellularly? We're made of information and we're majority water, right? Which we can show stores of the intelligence. So what are we clearing right now collectively? And it's a lot of scarcity. It's a lot of lack. It's a lot of this fearful mindset that we don't live in an abundant world and that there's scarcity or poverty. I mean, now don't get me wrong, those things are real and they exist, right? But it's also the way that we perceive them.
Mm-hmm. That's absolutely true. Your perception of reality makes your reality. Whether
Yeah.
that's the, as you say, whether or not that's the hard truth, or that's just how you're viewing that certain situation, it dramatically changes everything. So when you went through your first ketamine treatment, can you walk us through what that feels like for someone getting this treatment? I know there's a lot, especially for people that have never done anything with psychedelics. There's the Hollywoodization, the dramatization of what psychedelics is, fear and loathing in Las Vegas type stuff.
Right. Right.
What is this experience actually like, and what did you come out the other side realizing?
Yeah. I went to the universe. I initially saw the cosmos. I saw stars. I saw this, what I would interpret now as the void, in total darkness with this mysticism of what looked to be the cosmos and the stars, to truly travel through higher states of my own inner intelligence. And it created space. So, the things that I've really become familiar with is how much trauma and anxiety was trapped in my body because of being full throttle, right?
Mm-hmm.
And that was directly connected to not only childhood, but it was connected to speed and aggression and hurry and worry, right? Like there's a notorious phrase in EMS and in the military, it's hurry up and wait. So we have this huge urgency and duress and we're on our way and then we pause and we wait, right? And so now our adrenaline is full throttle. We've even made energy drinks about it, right? There's no disputing the full throttle side of this. And then we sit and we wait idle. Where's all that energy going if we're not dispersing it, right? Because a lot of times you can't just drop and like do 100 burpees and get it out of you. You're holding space with it. And to where it can become trigger happy. We have accidental discharges. Like it gets sloppy all over the place depending on how well trained your muscle memory is. And not everybody's built the same, right? Which is why we have all different iterations of branches. So what it started to allow me to see was the feeling of anxiety to be separated from it.
Okay.
And when it comes back online, you're like, holy shit, is my nervous system dysregulated? But because I was so accustomed to it, I had no idea that that's what was going on inside of my body until you're able to separate. And then as you come back online, you're like, oh, and now you can feel triggers. You can feel provocations. And I'm like, holy shit, I can feel that I'm being triggered. So now it became choice, right? Am I going to act out of this trigger? Or am I going to hold space for myself, which is a art. That requires practice and daily due diligence, because otherwise I was acting out of my trauma. And so now I was making decisions out of full throttle. I was making decisions out of hurry and worry rather than being in a restful, centered state to where I could make that decision from what is my heart space rather than this reptilian survival mechanism of my head space.
So it gives you that opportunity to have a more objective viewpoint of what's going on instead of reactionary.
Oh yeah.
One thing that I've been told in therapy is to, if you're like feeling like you're overwhelmed, is to label the feeling. And that helps you separate from it. So like if you're angry, you're like, this is anger. And so that way, you know, it's anger. And so you're naming it and able to recognize it so that you don't have to react to it, but you can respond to it.
Right.
And that's been super helpful for me, which seems very similar to what your ketamine experience was like.
Yeah.
And one thing that you said earlier was, and I'd be interested to hear the rest of your journey along with this, is psychedelic assisted therapy is a catalyst. And I think people, it sort of has this wonder drug type of feel to it right now in terms of people talking about it. But what people should know is that it is very much just a step. I mean, it's a great stepping stone, but it is a stepping stone, and it is a first step towards healing that requires an immense amount of work afterwards.
Yeah. Well, and I wouldn't say, well, immense is definitely a powerful word in this, right? Depending on the depth of your trauma, that's a variable. If
Sure.
ketamine could speak up, it'd be like, hey guys, I'm pretty consistent. It's the human and the providers that are the variable.
Interesting.
Because the medicine's opportunistic, meaning it's going to give you an opportunity to cultivate a shift. So if I have this profound experience, I'm able to take away my own intelligence, right? That's another part of the way that we work with the medicine, is that you're the answer. We're here holding space and anchoring in and providing a safe environment. But those answers are within. We're not extrapolating. We're also not implanting our own belief systems into your mind movie, right? Some people aren't ready yet to hear what we can clearly see, right? And even that, I'm still subject to my own interpretation of what I think you should be, which is completely false. I can't ask you to be something that you're not ready to be. That is such an unfair expectation, right? And so as you sit with the medicine, those answers come up for you. And in that, that's irrefutable, because now you firsthand witnessed yourself concluding or ideating or whatever that may be, because the medicine meets you where you're ready to be met, which means it's not too much too soon. It's developmental. And in that development, you're then able to shift. And that's where this relationship with how much has our body memorized suffering. Because if I have this profound experience and I'm like, man, I never want my kids to see me drink again, I'm going to cut back on my cell phone. And then here comes going back to life, and it feels like whelm, and you're over it. You're going to go right back to what feels familiar if you don't have some strategies that have been built in for you to cultivate a shift, right? It's a hell of a lot easier to just go distract and distort rather than to cultivate this shift, because that's where the work is. And so, to your point, it can be an immense amount, right? There are some people right now that can't even get out of bed. They're going to have a little bit harder of a time because it requires them to truly shift the memorized state of their body, versus someone who's been like, you know what, I've done breath work, I've done cold therapy, I run every single day, I eat great, but I still can't get this trauma that's seared in my head out of me. That medicine's going to meet you much differently than somebody who is right now ready to come off of Xanax and maybe 10-year relationship with Lexapro or whatever it is, right? We're deep into these things that have been limiting us from feeling. You take away the antidepressant and you're going to feel all the feels you've ever suppressed. The end. And that is where the work begins, because now you're going to have to navigate what it feels like to have all this sadness or grief come up.
Well, I think something you said right there is the key point. It's the work. There is no quick fix button. There is no drug that you take that fixes your problems. There's the drugs that she was just talking about that mask the problem, that cover it up, that make it so you don't recognize it being there. And then there's the stuff like ketamine where it gives you the opportunity to work through it, but it's not going to fix your problems for you. You still need to show up every day, ready to make the change. And that's one of the big things with why she named it Flow Integrative, is that there's integration activities and events that happen after the medicine. The medicine is to kickstart things. You're now ready to pursue change. And I'll let Kristy talk about what things she's able to offer on the backside, and how this treatment takes place, what it looks like. You show up, you get the treatment, what happens after that.
Yeah. We have a few different tools, right? I mean, we have vibroacoustic therapy in-house, which allows the reprogramming and patterning with frequency through the body. A good example of that is if you've ever had pain, right? And you can override your body's suffering. You're like, a classic example is like if all of us right now were to break our foot, I don't know if any of us would actually go put our foot up, right? We would just drag it along with us regardless, or we would strap it to the bike or whatever we would do. We would just keep going. We can override it. And so people have overridden their body to where they don't have a relationship with it. And so there's tools to help reprogram and pattern that so that your body can feel again. Because otherwise we can just shut it down and shut it off. Even to the point of even fasting, right? We can override our hunger. We can override, as a professional in the ER, we used to override using the restroom. Like you would just intentionally not drink water so you didn't have to take a pee break, because that took up too much time because you were getting your ass kicked in the emergency room, right? So how much have you separated from your relationship to your body? So we have tools for that, right? We use the In Harmony Sound Lounge. We have meditation cushions. We just incorporated a red light bed. The trifecta red light bed is absolutely incredible for the photomodulation that it allows for at the mitochondria level. Chronic stress starts depleting us of everything, of core energy mechanisms in the body, right? Which is why we become so fucking tired. God, sustained trauma and PTSD or anxiety, it taxes your adrenal glands like crazy. And then we have meditations built in. We have different binaural beats built in. We have the ability to have conversation with therapists. It really depends on what you're ready to embark on. You can fast for free. You can do cold showers at home for free. Sunlight is free. And so is grounding. And those are some of the biggest things I ask people to do. It's go get barefoot. Put your feet in the grass, let the sun hit as much as your body that you can allow to be shown safely. And then go focus on no device.
I love doing that. I'll take the dogs for there's a hike right by us where I'll just go walk barefoot through these hills, and people look at me like I'm crazy. I mean, part of it I do so I can walk down to go surfing barefoot without grinding my feet up. So I'm like, oh, I'll just keep them conditioned. But it just feels so nice being out barefoot, walking with the dogs while they're running around off leash. I leave my phone in the car. I don't bring anything with me, and it's my time to think. There's people that consciously sit down and this is my meditation time. I'll set a timer for 15 minutes and I'm going to meditate for this time. For me, it's more of an active thing where I just go walk for however long it takes me to do that walk is my quiet time. I don't, a lot of time I'll do it by myself. I'll have the dogs so they don't talk with me. I don't see many other people, so I'm not talking with them. It's just me and my thoughts. I don't have my phone, and I'm outside barefoot. And it's so relaxing. And I honestly come up with the majority of my work ideas while I'm out there or while I'm driving in my car with the radio off.
Oh yeah, for sure. We move through space at 18 miles a second. We're always moving forward and very quickly, right? And so it's pulling ourselves being out of enmeshed in that hurry and worry and speed and aggression, and allowing things to make manifest because we're present. Otherwise, we're ruminating, we're conjuring, we're ideating, we're making up all of these storylines that go along with, how many times have you had arguments with people in your head, right?
Oh, and that'll spike your adrenaline like nothing else. Like an imaginary argument that never actually happened and that may
Yeah.
never happen. Just thinking about how you should have told your boss off, or how that person that pissed you off when you're trying to park your car, and you just have these fictional arguments in your head, and you come out of it like, my heart rate is racing right now.
Oh yeah.
But you won, definitely.
Yes,
you definitely
100%.
won.
I win every time.
Every time.
Well, and to your point, Kevin, like that's where we are chasing a feeling. And so adrenaline, for me, for example, what's the worst call you've ever run is a common question, right? Well, that also translates to that's my threshold. So now if my threshold is a traffic accident with rollover and ejections, maybe it's also on fire. Now, I need, as a professional, to meet and exceed that call in order to feel the next call. And so if that doesn't happen, so now a cute grandma that just has some back pain, that's down here on excitability level, right? Not saying that they're different, right? But they are as a feeling, because now there's this huge gap. And so this starts to feel like lack.
Mm-hmm.
So now I don't want to go do it, or I don't have as much spunk in me because it doesn't feel like anything. It's just like, it's routine. And so then what does that translate over to my home life? And so now I need to go skydiving on my days off, because that is going to definitely break some barriers. Or I need to do something really fast downhill, or maybe I'll go surfing with, one hand or what behind the boat, or maybe I'll start doing dock starts. So now I'm just continuously trying to one up where my threshold is. And so that was another big thing for me of why to build this, because it gives our body the ability to go into R&R. And when it goes into rest and restoration, then those natural levels will start to come down to where we can feel again.
Absolutely. Does that feeling lead to complacency? Like as a police officer, for instance, if you're used to seeing, barricaded shooters and violent criminals, and then you go into something that you think is going to be a much lesser interaction, you shut off your awareness, you shut off your defensive mechanisms, and then it turns into something more, and you're caught off guard. Is that something that police officers, firefighters, military personnel are having to deal with if they're constantly amped up?
For sure.
So really, this turns into in the military they call it POTF, preservation of family and force, where they're trying to keep service members capable and involved and healthy. If they experience 20 years of combat and or even like one deployment of combat, and they're coming back and they're needing to have these raised levels of adrenaline. Is something like this treatment going to make it so that they will have more longevity? They won't have that same level of complacency. They'll be more effective in their job.
100%. When we take survival as a mechanism, right? Because that limbic system is what is now connecting and driving our prefrontal cortex, our belief systems, the way that we think and feel. When we're able to separate that limbic system temporarily, it then allows all the other body systems to come online. Now the pituitary gland wakes back up because it's not being overridden or bombarded by the chemicals of stress. And now even circadian rhythm, right? And for men, this becomes really important because that's where testosterone production is. So circadian rhythm starts to stabilize, testosterone starts to stabilize or normalize. Otherwise, we're just completely full throttle and we're burning it at both ends, right? And that's not sustainable. We can override it. I mean, I used to be able to drink Red Bulls and go to bed.
Yeah. I could sleep literally whenever, wherever.
Oh yeah, I can sleep standing up if I needed to, right? And you just
It's a
wake up
gift to the
and
military, and I'm sure first responders.
Yeah.
yeah. And so it allows the systems to come back into stasis. Homeostasis is what the body is continuously trying to regulate. And when we give it an opportunity to separate survival as a mechanism, all other things start to stabilize. And in that stabilization, that's what creates space. And in that space, you're able to see when you are engaged in this quick reality, right? So now I can even see it just trying to get the kids out the door some mornings. I'm like, fuck. Because now it's just like, where are your fucking shoes? Right? And I'm like, okay, coming back here, just like my depiction of this reality is also coursing theirs. And so now they always feel rushed or whatever it is, right? Like, who in the hell made up 8 o'clock for little kids to get out of bed and have their shit together? It's
That's
like
the worst.
wild. It's wild to me. Uh, and so, like, I can see when I'm engaged in that. So, how do I pause, come back to center, re engage to where it's still going to get done? It doesn't take my urgency or my sense of duress because I've been trained to hurry up and get out the door or whatever it is. And then you add in insubordination even to that, right? I think that's another thing that should be talked about. It's like, how do you transition from this role where you are the ultimate authority on a scene and you have command presence, and then you go home and you're so far out of touch with your children or whatever that may be, and nobody listens to you. And so now it's like this insubordination feeling. It's this, it's impactful is what it is, because now you're not being heard at the same magnitude of what you are used to in a command presence set and setting. And even that becomes really challenging. It's easier to go back to work, right? You're like, well, I want to go back to work where people fucking listen to me. And you're like,
I've been thinking about that a lot with my 4-year-old, the one that I told you is calling me bra now. And because that's one of the, he's very headstrong, and it's his way or the highway. We always say, like, Banks is either going to be a CEO or he's going to end up in prison. Like, those are his only two options. We're going to make sure that he's a CEO and not end up in the slammer. But one thing I've been thinking about a lot lately is, I mean, would I want this kid to just like blindly obey me? Would I want him to blindly obey just an adult because they're an adult, because they're older? It kind of goes back to your statement earlier about, wisdom and age. Like, it's some people live the same year 30 times over. Some live 5 years and have 25 years of wisdom built into those 5 years. So, I think that there's something to say about, kids questioning authority. I think it's, they're mourning boundaries for sure, but also I think it's a healthy habit as long as they do it respectfully.
right. Yes. I ask him, I'm like, you guys, do you think I have my shit enough together that I can tell you what needs to be done, and you just understand that that's part of the mission? It's so fascinating to watch kids as they are, because everybody's player one, right? Like, one thing that I witnessed, if my kids are engaged here, my daughter's doing this, my son's doing this, and then here I come, all I'm doing is just disrupting their realities with the interpretation of what I want them to be doing rather than what they currently are doing. So how do you have this conversation of like, hey, I think I just taught the kids, it's like, do you have a minute to be able to just ask before it just becomes this like blurt moment, right? Where they're just like, I'm in the middle of thinking and here comes both kids. And you're like, holy shit, you guys. Uh, so it's boundaries for sure, and establishing those, but then it becomes, at least for me, it was blurred in the sense that, uh, you go from these little tiny kids that are 100% dependent on you, right? And you're responsible for everything, even the way that they eat, drink, and breathe. And then now they have some autonomy and they're stepping in, and now it's this, they're experiencing self. And so to allow them to do things on their own, but with intelligent risk, and then trying to teach discernment and contemplation.
Absolutely. Raising children, it's a, in my 8 weeks of experience now,
I love
consider
that.
myself an expert, but from everything I've seen, it's a sliding scale of involvement and demonstrating, and then actually preaching, talking to them. I feel like the talking to level is the last resort, because that's, as you're talking about earlier on the different brain levels, verbal communications is the most recent version in the brain. Everything else has been visual and emotional. And so instead of trying to always talk and tell your kids, or talk to and tell your kids what to do, being a calming presence, being a role model presence, and having them involved in your life seems like it's a much more effective way. But because everything that we do in society nowadays is talk, tell, teach, we translate that to our kids, and I think for a lot of them it's overwhelming.
For sure. And something I learned, after my kids, I think my daughter was 9 at the time. The first 8 years of life, they're in this theta brainwave state where they're simply just witnessing. They're not listening. They can't understand routine, which it almost infuriated me, in the sense of like, why the fuck were we been trying to get them in routine since they were 4.5 years old to go to kindergarten? Like, that's bullshit. No wonder why kids think it's over the first time they go, right? Or they can't remember they don't need shoes every day, because they don't have conceptual awareness for that. The end. And so, with that being said, to know that doesn't happen until they get close to 8, 9, and 10, that allowed me to be such a different parent, in the sense of, why was I trying to condition them for a routine for the convenience of me? And it really, truly, I apologized incredibly to them for all of the years of me trying to get the fuck out the door, or whatever that was, and trying to get them from point A to point B, and hoping that they understood the routine in that, when it wasn't even conceptually possible yet.
Mm-hmm.
God damn it. Where was that breathing when we had the kids? I'm putting the car seat in the car, right? Like, hello.
Must have been left out from the instruction manuals.
Holy shit.
I'll tell you what, car seats, that is the origin of probably all of my worst moments as a parent. It's the car seat. Like, that is it, man. Like, if you can get the car seat figured out, Kevin, like, you might be like saving yourself from a lot of heartache.
I've got my ass handed to me by some car seats, Tim.
Pay the money for the good one.
Yes.
Dude, it's not even that. It's like full on. And I've got 2 boys that are, I mean, like,
is the mechanics of it, or is it getting the child physically into the car seat, or both?
It's for me, it's been, I mean, dude, my kids are feral, man. They are absolutely feral. And like, there's been some moments where you're just like, and it goes back to what Kristi's talking about, is like, and I mean, also, like, our routines largely are built because of like our work and stuff like that. So like, they are necessary in some sense, and like we are asking them to assimilate to them. Yeah. But yes, there's been some struggles, like full on like rigor mortis, like trying to get a kid into a car seat and just like, get in.
For sure.
So
taking a look around to make sure you're able to use your foot and push them in. Like, is anybody going to see this? Anyone filming?
At that point, like, film me, dude. Like, I just want to get this kid in the car. Put me on TikTok. I'll be that dad.
It's like reverse hostage negotiations. You're like, I will.
That's what they say. Talking with kids is like negotiating with terrorists.
God,
yes, 100%. I'm the best. Like, that should go on everybody's resumes. Like, I've negotiated with children under the age of 5 years old before.
Right. Yeah. Well, and to be clear on that point of routine, right? Routine is very important for the children, like as far as their sleep cycles and when you feed them and how you water them and sunlight. But to expect them to be on point with it
and on time,
age where it's not. Yes, and on time.
Especially to our level of punctuality. Like, we have 5 minutes. We need to be there. I was like, what's a minute?
No shit. I distorted their time reality as well too so much. When you're just like 30, or I'll be 1 minute, and then an hour elapses.
Yeah. So the really cool thing I want to bring the conversation back to is what you've built with Flow Integrative. And every time
Yeah.
I've told someone this, they're just like, wait, she did what? So Kristy, in her years of following down this path, some of it was intentional, some of it was just that was the path you were taking. You have somehow created an organization, a multi-leveled, multifunctional organization that not only serves people and provides them treatment using ketamine, but you've also managed to incorporate through your knowledge of the medical system with insurance providers. And
Yeah.
so correct me if I'm wrong, but you have agreements and essentially vendor approval with Blue Cross Blue Shield and TRICARE. And TRICARE is the crazy one, not the VA. Don't confuse it with the VA. This isn't for veterans. This is TRICARE, as in military healthcare, to subsidize or pay for these treatments. Talk through what this now means for Blue Cross Blue Shield, which for California is pretty much all of the police and fire department, correct?
Yeah.
And then TRICARE, which is all the military. This treatment is now accessible to these individuals.
Yes. And I thank you so much for making mention of that. One is, I believe that occurrence and the way that it unfolded was to let the guys and women know that this is legal. Like if there's anything that comes out of it, right, other than the opportunity for them to have some financial reprieve, it's let them know it's legal. It's so fascinating how many people think that they're not eligible for this, which is untrue. It is same categorically as testosterone. So if you have a pellet in you right now or you receive testosterone injections, it is the same categorically as ketamine. There's no separation. And so this is so accessible, and the insurance companies are acknowledging it as a treatment modality to be able to cover it. Even HSA covers it.
That's
which
huge
is
right there.
amazing. It's
I
huge.
know so many people that have this HSA, like, I don't know what I'm going to spend this money on. They just let it lapse, or they spend it on something they really don't need. Where, yeah, you can get ketamine assisted therapy with that money.
Yeah. Well, and infusion therapy, right? So the other side of this too is it doesn't necessarily, we have the therapeutical aspect built in, right? But you're not sitting here rehashing your trauma with someone who doesn't understand what you've seen or witnessed, right? I mean, we specialize in emergency medicine, and we specialize in those areas of relatability. My therapist came from the ER. She was extremely well versed in how to shift between tragedy and celebration, right? Like you see life and you see death, and that can happen in a matter of 30 seconds. And so she understands how to navigate and to understand and relate. And same for my medical director. So we're really showing up at the depths that we've met ourselves, which is really important. And on the other side of it, we can, a fascinating area, and perhaps this is another podcast for us, is that a
I'm
lot
sure
of
there'll be
times,
multiple conversations that we
I
have.
would love that, yes.
Yeah.
People don't want to be diagnosed, guys, because we're afraid now that thing's going to follow us around like fucking herpes or something. And just flare up, right? You're like, oh, I need
Herpes
life
is forever.
insurance, but yep, forever. And so sometimes you have flare ups, and like we're not casting labels, or you know what I mean. There's none of those things, right? But to check all the boxes, you have to have a foundation, because we have to be able to show trending, right? Are you getting better? Are you getting worse? Or are you staying neutral? Because then that'll allow us to shift the care plan, right? We work with naturopathy, and we work with different physician's assistants and different iterations to be able to show up for the individual based off of what they need and their goals. And that organization, one of the advances that I've been able to really step into, Kevin, is that now we're ready to overlay this protocol. The time now is to make an impact across the nation. And I have a global vision, but how do I take this entire infrastructure and overlay it into existing practice? And so right now we're ready to empower doctors. so that they can offer ketamine infusion therapy in their practice as a standardization of care. Because again, a lot of times we're just prescribing rather than cultivating. And for doctors, for them to offer ketamine infusion therapy instead of Xanax or instead of an antidepressant is going to make such a greater impact on consciousness than if we were to just medicate and check back in 6 months to a year, depending on, my availability. And one thing that we learned over these last 3 years is that the people lost a lot of faith in the doctors. And there was been over 300,000 that left medicine this last few years. And what does that look like now to be able to give doctors an opportunity to step in and start working with this medicine? And that's what has been built and is ready at this point, is to empower doctors with the infrastructure, all the intelligence that we bring, the protocols, the algorithms, so that they can start making an impact now.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and I know you said that other organizations like Kaiser Permanente, and this isn't a dig against Kaiser, they offer ketamine infusion therapy, but that they come at it from a medical perspective. You walk in, you put on the gown, you lay down on the gurney. It's a sterile room. It's very mentally unstimulating, or even unhomely, and you don't feel necessarily comfortable there. They give you the infusion, and then you leave. And the quote that you said that I absolutely love is, "Doctors don't like to see you cry." So they do everything they can. I think you said that as soon as you're done, they usher you out. They don't even want you in the waiting room because they don't want the other patients to see people crying as they're reliving it and going through the experience they just had to try and sort it out. And so that's the huge divergence between mental health and medical health that
Right.
you're trying to actually bring together with this overlay, where you're allowing doctors to facilitate the medicine, and then your organization will come in and help with the reintegration.
Yeah. And the implementation, right? I mean, what is the support, or where's the support needed for the doctors? And it's adaptive. We literally made it to where it will work for what you have rather than increasing workload, because doctors also can't take that on right now as well too, right? I mean, mind, body, and spirit. We keep pretending like the brain's not part of the equation when we're treating the body. You're just like, well, how's their mental game? They're like, no, we don't talk about that. You're like,
It's almost like how little doctors talk about nutrition in medical school. It's like one
uh,
semester or one class during one semester.
8-hour day. Yeah.
We don't worry about what you put in your body. We'll prescribe drugs and do surgery.
And one of the most wild things, you guys, is that, like, as I pull all these stats and just to see where we're at, collectively, we lose 1,300 people a day to fatness. Nobody's on the cupcake aisle. Nobody's running interference on sugar. And we're trying to put all these parameters around our consciousness and our evolution of our being. And it's like, it's so silly where we've placed this emphasis or focus rather than on being able to truthfully and wholeheartedly share with people the observations medically and mentally. If you're fat to the point of death, I should not be giving you a pill for that. I should be giving you a plan for that. And having that conversation around how to deduce it rather than avoiding the question in totality, right? And with that being said, it's the same for the mental health side of it. If you are sad, I don't want to hear what caused your sadness. I'll just give you a pill to suppress it. And then we can revisit it. Once that pill stops working, we can stack another one on top of it. What? If we were to look back at the root causality, you can see where the trauma imprinted, and then we can even then trace it all the way back to what compounds as autoimmunity, or why we have compulsions with overeating, because the root causality is sadness, is unlovability, is lack of worthiness. And in that, we honestly all just need some fucking hugs, right? I mean, at the end of the day, our normal operating system, we by design need 8 hugs daily. And that's 20 seconds heart to heart, no side hug and bullshit. That cultivates love as a feeling inside of our body, which allows us to thrive. Otherwise, what we've been trained to do now is go into isolation and deprivation and to distract and distort. And we have all these little computers in our hands, and it's just creating more separation. And so it's the community, it's the camaraderie, it's all of the things that we need for connection to be able to then thrive as a species. But if we all feel like we're in survival, then we're going to pull up the worst, which is lack. It's poverty, it's scarcity. And in that, our behaviors will, worst, rape and murder. Not to mention the stealing or any of the other behaviors that come along with survival. How do we deduce survival? How do we cultivate a shift to where we recognize that love is who we are? It's not something that's given or taken.
Speaking about love, this is kind of like an interesting segue into MDMA. I was having a discussion with a fellow Green Beret who was in Afghanistan like 09 through like 13, just like back to back to back deployments. And him and his buddies after each deployment would go and they would take they would do like a week of just like taking MDMA. Mm-hmm. And he said that nobody on his team has like had any issues with PTSD. Like it's been a very smooth transition out of the military. Like everything's been very good. And he credits MDMA to that successful transition and being able to like go in and out of a war zone like that so seamlessly.
That's amazing.
So yeah, what is your experience with it, or your thoughts on MDMA? And I know we talked about it a little bit before the show, but would be interested to get your perspective.
For sure. It's the cultivating of love. Well, and I'll give some context. If all we've ever felt is sadness, then love, when it comes, feels amazing. Because we've been without that feeling for so long chemically, which we then will attach to a human being, right? Like it's you that makes me feel this way. So now here comes, some trauma bonds and some other relational issues. And so when you haven't felt love, it's a reminder, right? And so I believe these medicines are developmental. One, if we can start at the fundamentals and deduce survival by then eradicating a lot of those belief systems or thought processes, it leaves room for love to be cultivated. There are times where if you go straight to love with MDMA, it can be convoluted, right? Or we can project it onto the person that either we're experiencing it with, right? Or whatever. And so it's reminding us that the magnitude that we can feel sadness is also the magnitude that we can feel love, is also the magnitude we can feel anger. They're all feelings. And MDMA is a beautiful reminder of love as a feeling that's inside of you, right? The drug just sparked it or brought it back to life. Because we've been so used to feeling speed and aggression, hurry and worry, right? And sometimes rest and digestion. It depends on, and that's where cannabis comes in, right? Cannabis will teach you R&R, but it does it very out loud, right? Like cottonmouth is just a big sign that you need water. That's it. That's it. We'll go grab a fucking Mountain Dew instead or whatever, you know what I mean? Like go get some water. Or it shows you that you're hungry. Because again, we've also learned how to override our systems. Cannabis shows you where you're lacking with sleep, food, and water. MDMA cultivates love as a feeling, and DMT, my God, it is our essence, right? We can show that DMT endogenously is a latent system. And so when you experience 5-MeO, and not necessarily bufo, right? There's a gentler way than just the rocket ship to the cosmos. When you wake up this latent system, that's exactly what we're doing, is waking up. It's so incredible. That's our consciousness. And then we come back into our earth body and we're like, oh, hello. I guess I'm still in San Diego. Uh, so they're
So
they're all amazing developmentally.
where do you see the future of mental health treatment being, you know, as we're trying to get away from some of these SSRIs and other pharmaceutically generated drugs? Well, I guess MDMA will still be kind of categorized as that. But as we are able to federally explore some of these plant-based medicines, you have ayahuasca, you have psilocybins, you have cannabis, all these areas that is it slowly being opened up. Or I know the veteran community has been very vocal about it because traditionally it's been pretty much self-medicate with alcohol or go to the VA, and whether they give you opioids or SSRIs, which both of them have their slew of side effects and other issues. So a lot of guys have been able to get their hands on these things to find a different self-medicating approach. And there's been a lot of anecdotal evidence and clinical evidence showing that these things have a very positive effect. Where do you see Flow Integrative being involved in this, and what do you see as the way forward to find better options for mental health treatment?
For sure. And the missions to give access. So I see us really cultivating and building out the protocols that are the most cost effective. Because otherwise it'll become an upper echelon piece, and then it becomes untouchable to the layman. And then they will go and try to do it themselves, right? And that can be harmful. So there's a lot that's happening right now on the black market and underground, right? I mean, there's a lot of people working in the underground space because they're just like, fuck it. To navigate these waters of the legalities is a mission. And so that's where I really do and have set my intention to be able to bring access to the people at the most cost-effective model. And for us as first responders and military, and that's including active duty. Like, why wait? And why are we waiting, right? We're almost proud of our hangovers. And then we go
The amount that the military promotes drinking, like I love
booze.
the Marine Corps. We have a great culture there, but that is a heavy drinking culture. But you do one puff of a joint and you pop on a piss test, you are gone. Like,
Right.
no questions asked. There's no altered course. Because you're just out. And so
But you're
I think
sweating Coors Light during fucking PT
Yeah.
all the time.
all the time.
And Coors Light's the tame one, you know.
Yeah.
Jack Daniels and some of the hardest stuff is usually the more likely contributor.
Right. And so it really is. It's like, at what point it's this fine line. Like, why are we listening to these people that made up these rules and to keep us limited? We're all Schedule 1s. The most prevalence is in your little tiny guy right now. He's full of DMT endogenously. Right? Like, it's so good. It's so amazing. But people need to learn how to do drugs. That's it. They should teach us how to fucking drink. They should teach us how to smoke instead of just telling you don't do it or glorifying it at a certain age point. If we could teach, and that's one of my, on my mission list, is to teach the world how to do drugs. If you've ever experienced an orgasm, you know the magnitude of the drugs that you can cultivate, right? All of those drugs exist in here, but you're able to tap into them. We've just been trained to give our power away to the other person, which was why love can turn to hate, which that should never be the truth, because that's not love. Right? It was just the power of a chemical that we gave away because we were lacking it initially because we didn't know how to cultivate it. So how do you do your own drugs, right? And it's through meditation, it's through breath work, and there are tools that can allow you to tap into where you don't need anything anymore, which is a really unfuckwithable place to be.
Absolutely.
I really like that. I like the word unfuckable with.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Going forward, I know you have the protocol you were talking about with ketamine. You've already have that established. Ketamine's a very understood substance in terms of how it interacts with the body, dosages, and all that. Through your nonprofit, remind me again, it's the Flow
Flow
Integrative Institute.
Flow
Yeah,
Institute,
Institute. I know that you're able to start developing some of these protocols as these substances become legalized. Ketamine has had decades of procedures established, and you're essentially mimicking those and creating strict SOPs for the mental health side that you can provide to doctors.
Yeah.
With the Flow Institute, how are you going to move forward with create a protocol for MDMA, for psilocybin, for DMT, and any of the others?
Yeah. Well, it's the ability to deliver it as and admitting that it's a beta test, right? I mean, we're literally piloting. What's most fascinating is everybody's practicing medicine. They literally call it their practice. That's real, guys. The end. And so all we've done is just be out loud with that. Like if we're piloting and beta testing, like, hey, Kevin, this is what I want to do. I would like to take methylene blue into red light here, into this, into this, into this, and then the transformation, and you become the pilot. You become the beta. So my mission is to reduce that cost so that people can come in, because we're developing protocol N of 1, meaning you have just as much autonomy in this mission as I do. I'm coming to you with my level of intelligence, and you're coming to me with your level of awareness of how you're moving through these experiences. When we partnered in 2022, we partnered with Dr. Bronner's and Inthea. And I was given the opportunity to build the first employer-driven benefit. And Dr.
That's Anthea, correctly?
Yeah. And Dr. Bronner's covered 100% of 100%. And so that means they don't discriminate. And so it was the safeguards that we had in play that then would allow us the due diligence for who we allowed into the medicine. But this medicine is so safe, right? And so it allowed me to build protocols for everyone. Now, how do we do that as well, too, developmentally, to where then we can impact the doctors so that they don't need to worry? And that's the next mission with MDMA. Our doctors are trained in MDMA. Our therapists are trained in MDMA. We're ready for when that occurs, right? And then we will reduce that cost to get people in the door, to put them through the medicine so that we can develop the protocols that are the most effective, right? And the most user-friendly. Otherwise, what happens is you're going to go do it sometimes in the back of a gas station, or at a party where somebody's drinking and it gives the drugs a bad name, but it's because people feel like they have to go hide. It's fucking wild. Same thing with DMT. I'm so excited to work with 5-MeO professionally to be able to show that latent system to then allow us to truly experience our essence, right? And to have that as a standardization of care. Same with psilocybin. Do you know what psilocybin could do for kids right now with ADHD that are chemically addicted to government-made methamphetamine in the form of Adderalls?
No, that's been probably the outside of the opioid crisis, that's probably the biggest problem we're going to be realizing down the road, is just the overprescription of Adderall, Ritalin, and all those with very young children who are now going to be, for the rest of their life, affected by the mental development while under those prescriptions. Right.
And it creates organization in the brain temporarily, right? By creating a track. That's what methamphetamine does, or amphetamines do. And so one thing, we talked about this before we started recording, I literally just removed Wi-Fi from my house so that my kids can't frazzle pop their brainwave states developmentally. Because that's what I was witnessing, right? They go so deep in the fucking metaverse that they can't come back into reality. And at what point do you allow them to have self-discipline in that? Well, they've proven that they can't, right? We can now show that this is just as much of a fucking addiction as booze or any other thing.
I talk about with Greg all the time. Like we've discussed putting Harder Not Smarter on Instagram, things like that. Like I've deleted Instagram off my phone so many times because I know I have an unhealthy relationship with it. I'll just doom scroll and be like 11:30 at night. I'm like, why am I still up? I'm literally doing nothing. I'm just scrolling through other people's shit.
Yep.
It's hilarious though. I
mean,
mean, some of that stuff is great. Let's be honest.
Videos on there are great. The kook
Right.
slam
Well,
videos and stuff. It's great.
for sure. And that's how it just is a time warp. And so how do you let kids figure out what their mind looks like? You take away a device and you let them sit. One of two things happens, right? Either they just continuously talk about how it fucking sucks. You're like, yeah.
It does. Sorry.
Or they go and actually become and they go outside, guys. Right? It's like that's what they've forgotten how to do because it's so easy to go look at it on your screen. And so now they're witnessing how busy their mind is or lack thereof. And so that's what I'm truly trying to teach the kids right now is how to organize your thoughts without distraction or distortion. And the imprint that it leaves in these fucking memes becomes their belief system. I'm like, where'd you learn? Like, that's somebody else's belief that just got programmed into your mind movie.
Mm-hmm.
Mm-hmm.
Well, the other really important thing that people undervalue is the value of boredom. Like if you're constantly stimulated, if you're, I do, I'm guilty of it. I'll sit in front of the TV and have my phone in front of me at the same time. Like this TV show isn't stimulated enough. Let me pick up my phone and also do something else at the same time. Like having the ability to let your mind be bored and still and collect its own thoughts and not have the need to be constantly stimulated. Because that's what I think a lot of the issues we see today is that there's just overstimulation constantly. So when it's finally quiet, your brain freaks out. It's like, why do I not have things going on? And they try and create things and bring things in. That's why you pick up your phone every time you see anybody sit in a room without anything else for more than like 3 seconds, phone immediately out. It's just like, I don't want quiet. I need to have something going on so I don't have to think.
Right. Yep. Yeah. Well.
And like social media, I mean, they use psychology to their favor. In scrolling, like that's the way that they have their algorithm set up is on purpose. It's intentional that you wouldn't. So you like one movie or one video, you scroll once, don't like that one. Scroll another time, don't like that one. Scroll again, but then you like that one. And it's the same thing over and over again because if you like every single video, you'll get bored of scrolling through it. But if you are having to like actually go through the process of like scrolling through it grabs you and takes you in. Like there's science behind the actual psychology of scrolling through your feed.
They call it programming. Do you guys remember when we were kids? It's like the program's here. Like, I'm gonna download Married with Children, guys. Can't wait for dysfunction to become my core belief system. Like, what the fuck? But you only recognize that now, decades past, right? In self-reflection, I'm like, holy shit. Those were the early imprints of what I thought a family system was going to be, or what was. It's like TV program. You're like, ooh, here comes your amygdala just acquisitioning. Holy shit. Yeah. It's interesting, right? And that's where it's all developmental because for some people aren't ready to hear it yet. Other people have like, oh yeah, I transcended that, right? We're all in these different iterations of our own consciousness, but we share everything collectively because of oneness.
Mm-hmm.
And that's where we create balance. It's like as if all these different symphonies were playing in the background, there's got to be a frequency that meets in the middle or normalizes. And that's our basis, or that's our average, if you will, for the world. We all share it. There is no separation, right? And so for what you heal in you also heals in me, and vice versa, which is why it's really important with working with this medicine that the provider has been doing the work as well. There was nothing worse, like when I was a brand new medic, there was some providers that were morbidly obese trying to talk to you about chest pain. You're like, what the fuck? So it's confusing, right, to the layman, but because we went to school and we have these initials, then we're supposed to be taken as gospel, but in reality, we're just practicing.
You got that white lab coat with the stethoscope. You are an authority figure now.
Mustard or something. You're like...
in getting these treatments out to especially the first responder and service member community. You have the Blue Cross Blue Shield, which I know you're working towards getting the police and fire department, because they have their own very regular series of traumas. You
Yeah.
have TRICARE, so you have the active service members that you're creating access to. Where are you in the process now with getting the VA on board? 'Cause I know they're doing clinical trials. I've seen articles recently. Actually, I just got an email yesterday or the day before from the Navy SEAL Foundation asking about psychedelic mental health treatment surveys. There's a lot of stuff out there, and veterans are probably honestly like I say, more important, but the more at risk group than service members, because service members at least still have that regular purpose and mission and community. The veterans, once they're separated, a lot of them lose that community, and they go into isolation. They don't necessarily have that purpose, and so they're the more vulnerable of all three of those groups: first responders, service members, and veterans. What needs to happen to get the VA on board? And I know they're notoriously difficult to get approval, but once you do, it's like the gold standard.
Right. Well, they have a few years still to prove to themselves, right? And that's so unfortunate, right? They've really siloed. And so for them to reach out for providers, I mean, like, we could help exponentially right now, but who flips the button? And if the VA has the same standards, there are some people still, you guys, that don't recognize this as a treatment. There's some providers who think this is illegal. There's some providers that think it's for horses. And it's like, when was the last time you picked up some new material? Because the belief systems are truly through the lens of that observer. And if the people who are making the rules are still archaic, then what they're doing is they're impacting humanity blindly.
Yeah, it's an unfortunate system we've created where a lot of the people making decisions are of older generations. They've taken time to get to the leadership positions within organizations, within government, and they're bringing in, the Reagan era view of drugs, Nancy Reagan's war on drugs,
with their hot toddy in their hand.
Yeah, with their hot toddy, or they're doing lines of blow behind the scenes, like in Charlie Wilson's war, where he's doing cocaine off hookers in the hot tub before going into Congress.
Yes.
There's a lot of speaking out the sides of your mouth in that community, but because they've worked to become the authority figure, they now enjoy having the authority over others, having that level of control. I'm not saying all of them are maniacal or evil in the thoughts. A lot of them have just been, as you said, programmed into that line of thinking, and for them to change change their belief system about the science of things. If they're surrounded by people who are telling them one thing, or they have lobbyists, or they have constituents telling them one thing, it becomes very difficult to overcome that hurdle. So I think, unfortunately, a lot of what's going to have to happen is we outlive the current not regime, that's not the right word, leadership establishment, and bring in people with different schools of thought to bring about this change and have a more open mindset about what these things can do. We keep coming back to alcohol. I have no issue with alcohol. I drink from time to time, but the level of acceptability we have around it, when you look at the stats of how much damage between fights and violence and vandalism and health concerns all associated with alcohol, like it's probably got to be in the billions of dollars a year in costs. When was the last time you saw a guy smoking weed get in a fight?
Never.
doesn't
Not
happen
unless he was
often.
drinking.
Yeah,
he was drinking, right?
mixing things.
Same for ketamine.
Yeah, and so there are concerns of abuse. There are concerns of misuse and poor ways of administering these things and lack of oversight. You need to have protocol to make sure that there is standardization and there is effective use. But I think we should start opening our aperture to what is acceptable, what is effective, what might have options out there that we just need to give the chance to get a better outcome than what we currently have right now. Because alcohol and SSRIs are not long-term fixes.
No.
So
yeah. And to go back to your, like, I mean, where was I going to go with this? And we're not asking like for these drugs to be used recreational, right? We're asking for these to be available in a clinical setting, a controlled environment with professionals that are trained on being able to provide these treatments. So it's not like we're opening up the aperture that wide, right? It's not that crazy of an ask just to make this available.
Yeah, we're not asking for MDMA to be readily available at a 7-Eleven behind the counter.
Will I allow it? Yes. I mean, I would.
Ideally, for an angel to come in and to allow $3 million to be dedicated, we could start treating hundreds of veterans right now for free.
That's we being Flow Integrative.
Oh, yeah.
Listen up, everyone.
Yeah.
Let's do it.
For sure.
I know you guys are trying to get the clinic built out in Encinitas. So for those of you not familiar with Encinitas, it's North County, San Diego. There's a huge veteran population here. There's obviously first responders. There's people with other trauma. And I know you guys are actually looking to also expand into human traffic victims. They have their own slew of trauma that they need to deal with. So this isn't meant as a recreational psychology treatment, the run-of-the-mill soccer mom that's just having a bad day and wants to get ketamine. This is for effective treatment against people with established trauma who are providing valuable services to the American public. And so by getting this facility open, you're now enabling these treatments to be more broadly accessible to the people who need it most.
Oh, yeah. We could cultivate so many jobs as well, too, right? I mean, that's where we're building out the camaraderie. Who picks these guys up? Who brings them home? Who wants to take them to lunch, right? I mean, there's so much volunteer work for the angels to come in and to truly make donation. We can start treating veterans right now for full solution, right? I mean, running them through the medicine, to have naturopathy for those conversations, access to the red light therapy, access to the vibroacoustics, the neuromodulation, true overhaul of that trauma and their transition, right? Or the transition ability to step into a world where for a lot of those guys that came back from Vietnam, they weren't welcomed back, right? I mean, there was so much discontent that was thrown at them, and to really cultivate that community and love rather than the isolation, deprivation, and suicidality. I mean, right now it costs the American people billions of dollars for what is now spewing into the emergency rooms for mental health solutions, which all that does is just get mooted, put in a hallway, and then discharged. We spend billions of dollars on mental health. Mental illness is what they call it, right? Well, who's cultivating the fitness? And so now we're training, right? And if you can just teach these guys, again, it comes back to the desire to teach the world how to do drugs. If you can teach them or give them an algorithm of how to step in, they can do it just as much as they could do all the things that they were trained in the military. You're just giving them the tools of things that they never knew clearly. It wasn't even until the fucking late 80s, early 90s that we realized that we need to drink water, guys.
Is that I had no idea.
That's real talk.
That's something that I guess I take for granted.
The old Army and Marine Corps stuff where they're like, water's a crutch. Don't drink water from your canteen. That canteen better be full by the time you get back from the ruck march.
Oh, yeah. Right? I don't know. There's a lot.
So where can people find you who are interested in supporting, donating, investing in Flow?
Yeah. Flow Integrative Ketamine.com is our clinic. Flowintegrative.org is our organization. And you can find me on LinkedIn. You can email directly as well too at hello@flowintegrativeketamine.com. Those emails come right to me. You can message me on LinkedIn. I don't have social media
Outside of LinkedIn.
outside of LinkedIn, and I don't even really go on that a majority of the time. But yeah, I mean, or call directly, right? I mean, you can find the phone number on our website and it rings. It's sitting here right next to me. So the mission is real. The impact is crucial. And it really is something for all of us, you know?
Absolutely. We're definitely gonna have to have a follow-on conversation about some of the other areas that we didn't get a chance to talk about, but this has been a very eye-opening experience. And I really hope that there's some listeners out there who either can get the help that they're looking for, or they can provide support to an area they're passionate about. You know, it doesn't have to just be the current solution. There are other ways that are out there.
Yeah. Yeah.
Well, thank you very much, Kristy. It's been a
Thanks,
pleasure
Kristy.
having
This is
you
awesome.
on.
Thank you. Same, you guys. I really appreciate it. It was great.
Absolutely.